Welcome to the Marvel Cinematic University podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Canton III, and we are continuing our coverage of the Disney Plus series Daredevil Born Again, episodes 5 and 6, a two-pack for this episode. And what's also, would you consider this a two-pack? It's kind of a two-pack if you listen to this podcast or watch this podcast. patreon.com/MCUniversityPod. You can get our bonus content, such as John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, which we did with our pal Rod earlier this week. It is out. $3 to get that episode in our backlog of every single MC University bonus episode. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, Jake holding up the DVD. Is that Blu-ray?
Whoa. I don't collect DVDs. I collect Blu-rays.
Blu-rays.
I'm kidding. I'm not kidding about collecting Blu-rays. I'm kidding that I care.
Yes. Totally understandable. And if you're so inclined, obviously, like I mentioned, the $3 to get all of those episodes and get into our Discord. Some fun talk about the Doomsday cast situation in our Discord, which, by the way, programming note, there will be a Doomsday cast episode specifically dedicated to that, so there will be no talk about that here. This is just a Daredevil episode, so if you want that, you'll get that in our Road to Doomsday miniseries next week. We have a nice show planned for you guys. And with that being said, my lovely producer and pal, Jake Christie. Jake, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. Odd to be recording on a Friday, but excited to talk about these two episodes. I'm glad that they did these two, because I think, just to jump into it, just a quick thought, I think if they just released episode 5, the vibes would be off because it doesn't, people would be like, what the hell, that was it? So I think that this was a really smart decision to do 2 in 1.
It kind of reminded me of a old era of TV where you got the episode 5, I should say, where you kind of have this self-contained just situation happen to Matt. He meets Yusuf Khan, and we get that whole situation with the bank robbery. And the fact that it's self-contained, I think of the Fly episode in Breaking Bad as an example.
Which is a great episode.
Great episode. There's Pine Barrens, The Sopranos, like that's another example of like just something like off the beaten path. And TV, when sometimes like, I don't know, I felt so nostalgic kind of watching that part because it felt different. What did you let's focus on episode 5 first, because there's a lot going on in it. What did you think generally first?
I felt very similarly. I very much feel that television is television and shouldn't be treated like movies, as I said a million times. And I feel like the people who don't appreciate episodes like this, like, even if, because I don't even think this episode was super successful at being what it was, but I think that the episodes like this are what makes television a unique art form. And I feel like the surest sign that someone doesn't know ball is when they complain about the Fly episode of Breaking Bad. It's like, no, this is a different type of storytelling. We're allowed to do this. And I feel like this obviously was from the original iteration of the show. I would be shocked if any of this was filmed after the restart, but I felt like it was a really interesting reprieve from everything going on. But it also, like, it did a thing that I think these shows sometimes fail to do, or like especially the movies fail to do, is like, because they need to get to the character fighting the nemesis or the really big bad quickly, they yada the everyday acts of heroism that these characters have to be having. So a lot of times what happens is you'll just be told, like, there'll be like a short montage, or like you'll just be told like superhero XYZ is saving all these people, and it's like, well, we only really see him fight the big bad. We don't see him fight the day-to-day things. And I think Daredevil, as a street-level character, he can't only be fighting Kingpin. You know what I mean? Like, he has to be fighting just goons and criminals, he's Daredevil. He's not, Superman, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, this is a really cool way. And the thing I really liked about it is how it married the skill sets of Matt Murdock and Daredevil.
Yes.
Because Matt Murdock alone did a lot of shit in this that was really helpful. It wasn't all just beating people up. Most of it wasn't, actually.
I enjoy that we have an English actor playing a American character doing a English impersonation.
Well, he did. It was Irish, technically. I've
Irish, yeah.
actually long said a thing I once wanted to do as a project, but it would be so hard to do. Is make a compilation of English actors playing American characters doing fake English accents. Because I know it happens. Obviously, famously, McNulty does it in The Wire,
Right.
and it's funny because obviously Dominic West's American accent is fucking horrible.
Oh
I
my
know
god,
that
it's
I remember
leaking.
Gillian Anderson did it in the X Files, and then I know that there's an episode of House too where he does it. But like those are the ones I could find. And I once asked Twitter, for example, someone to make a montage, but no one got back to me. So now that this show is a little bit big, if you have more examples, I might still do that. But I love that as a phenomenon where it's like, oh, because it can't be that good. You can't just do your regular accent.
Yes, yes, and so I think the thing, and it's funny. So every so often, I will look to see like reactions on the internet of the episode, and I found myself intrigued. And at some point, we'll probably get T John before the end of this
Mm-hmm.
run because he's had some very strong takes about
Mm-hmm.
the series itself, and we don't have any Foggy or Karen or anything along those lines. And this kind of is an episode that if you are that type of person, you're
Yeah.
like, why don't we get this and why don't we get that? And
Yeah.
I, I will say, like, in terms of something to its detriment, and I understand that the MCU feels like it kind of has to tell the maybe the Netflix only people who were watching Daredevil before, like, oh, there's this character, Miss Marvel, and
Yeah.
stuff like that, and she matters and she's
Mm-hmm.
important. I get that. I get that to a degree. I feel like they've had such a hard time doing that because it comes off so heavy-handed. And
Yes. Yep.
yes, that's
Yeah.
all.
It
That's one
was
of the
laid
things that
on way
annoys
too
me.
thick. The
Yeah.
first couple references were fun, and then it got like I feel like honestly my big one of my main thoughts watching was like I think that if you're going to lay it on this thick, I actually think, and this would not happen because of who Matt Murdock is, but like if it was anyone other than Daredevil, the way that that part of the story ends is by the superhero revealing that he's a superhero and Yusuf saying, "My daughter's Miss Marvel." Like that's what it feels like they're setting up. But you know that's not gonna happen because Matt is super cagey about letting people know he's Daredevil. But
Right.
like that's almost feels like what they're setting up, and the fact that they don't get there, which they I didn't expect they would because he's Daredevil. But like, why are you laying it on that thick? We get it. We know. I know that the Marvels didn't do that well, but like people know that Kamala Khan is Miss Marvel. We got it.
Yeah, I feel like that was the thing that kind of threw me off a little bit. Though I did find it interesting that another Marvel superhero having trouble getting a bank loan is a thing that happens in this
Mm-hmm.
in this episode as well. Seems like a running gag that they're trying to do
Mm-hmm.
there. Um, how did we feel about these robbers? Did we like these robbers? Do we enjoy their performances? What give me a tease?
I thought making them like Irish was a fun element. I felt like the main guy was really had like a lot of good bank robber vibes. Like it was really confident. The fact that the rest of them were kind of like faceless was fine. I didn't expect anything differently.
Hmm.
But my main problem with the bank robbery, and I mean this not as like a joke, is I think that like I think they might even be using the same location, and it just felt in vibes so similar to Inside Man, which is a
Yes.
5-star movie. I know people might find me on that, but it's incredible.
Okay.
And it's like
Nice.
the entire time I'm like, not in like obviously I don't expect the regular episode of Daredevil to be as good as Inside Man, but some of it like in the way the vibes and location was so similar. I'm like, you can't be evoking anything that's much better than what you're doing. Because especially like the fact that the plan too was to disguise itself to escape, like it just a lot of stuff like this is just not. I almost wish that I think we either needed a lot more behind the scenes with the bank robbers to see what the plan was, or a lot less. Like the plan is just not that sophisticated, but it's also like a little too sophisticated to seem like the bumbling idiots. Obviously, we know they're not bumbling idiots because we know that they have a boss. Um, but yeah, if the episode wasn't that long, I almost wish that there was more. Like it was. I almost wish that the heist was even cleverer, and there was more of like it felt like more of a worthy adversary for Matt Murdock because the actual like machinations of the heist were not that interesting.
No, it was mundane in that aspect. I think the tension of Matt trying to figure out what's the best way to go about doing this, that I enjoyed. And I think to your point earlier, the marriage of the Daredevil and Matt Murdock character, I think is the thing that excelled the most in this episode as being able to use his blindness as something to just come back in. How would anybody know this blind person walking back into a bank?
Hmm.
And like in most cases, I feel like whether in real life or in other
Hmm.
iterations of TV and movies, I feel like these robbers would have shot a bunch of these people already. Like
Yeah.
I remember when the initial portion of
Hmm.
the robbery started, there was the dude with the long curly hair. He was
Hmm.
trying to attack somebody. Normally that dude would have been shot
Yeah.
immediately. So
Yeah.
like just
I
little
mean,
just little stuff like that.
the thing is, I think in movies that's true. I think in real life, and this is gonna sound like it's not true because people be like there's so much violence. The, in actual real world situations, reason why a lot of things don't turn deadly is because the amount of people on planet Earth who are actually willing to pull a trigger and kill someone for no reason is pretty low. So
Yeah.
but like the thing is, I think the main guy probably would have shot Matt. I don't think any of the goons would, because I think Matt's point is like you don't want to go to murder one. Like that's kind of a problem. But no, I agree with you. I feel like there's definitely was not. Once again, I feel like it wasn't as clever as it needed to be in order to make all of the stuff work. And I felt also too like I don't even know how you would do it, but you want the negotiator too to be a character we know maybe, or like I like the character they had. I'm forgetting her name. She was good, but like I wish that there was more of honestly would have really helped if there was some way that
Hmm.
Matt and her were communicating. Like it just felt like it was kind of all. I hate to keep using this word, but it like the actual machinations of the heist were not clever enough to sustain the
No.
whole episode, in my opinion.
No, I think what it felt like they were trying to rely on
Hmm.
was obviously Charlie Cox,
Hmm.
and also the kind of earnestness of Yusuf Khan,
Hmm.
and a lot of this aspect of this episode is him, like the stuff with the candy and him lying about knowing the key to the
Hmm.
vault and stuff, and then Matt telling him to stall and
Hmm.
all of those things going along, and him and Matt. I will say they did have a very nice rapport, and that
Yeah,
was
oh,
cool.
yeah. That was the most successful part of the episode to me.
Yes, and did you feel at first outset watching this episode that after kind of like the momentum of where everything was
Hmm.
going after four, did you feel like this kind of stopped things, or was it something along the lines of, well, there's another one, let's see what happens next?
Yeah, that was my from like a because there were two episodes. I didn't feel that way. Obviously, I think I think if it was just this one, I would have felt that to some extent, but because I'm a real TV head, I would have been like, it's fine, we'll get back to it. And also, I think thing too is because I know that the season's 9 episodes and they're in the middle of filming a season two, I'm also less worried about that. Like that's kind of like that's one of the biggest advantages of knowing that there's going to be another season, where it's like I feel a lot less pressure. They don't need to tell every Daredevil story in this season, and so I feel less pressure about that. I think that's a little annoying is that
Hmm.
because this episode was so clearly entirely shot before they reset everything. You wish that there were bookends at the beginning or the end to like keep things going. Like that was, I think, a pretty big miscalculation. I think you need something at the beginning to let the audience know that they know what just happened in episode four.
Yeah.
And something at the end to let the audience know, okay, we're getting back to everything in episode six. Without that, it was a little bit jarring. Um, but even then, I think because they released two at once, that was just not a major thought I was thinking of, because it's like, okay, the next episode will have shit happening in it that will be more for the big story.
Yeah, and I think the casualness in
Mm-hmm.
which Matt can beat somebody's ass and
Mm-hmm.
nobody notices is was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought that he had a little trouble with the main bank robber
Mm-hmm.
dude, which was kind of surprising. I was like, he kind of got to shake things off a little
Yeah.
bit. Seemed like old dude was giving him some hands for a
Yeah,
second.
that's always a thing I kind of get frustrated with these shows when it's a hand-to-hand fighter. That like I get that they want to make every individual fight interesting, but it's like he can't simultaneously be a guy who can beat up six guys in a hallway and have trouble with one guy. Like I don't think there's an easy solution to that, but it's like it makes me like, but I don't believe that he's gonna have this trouble with this guy.
This reminds me of all the stuff that Howard would tell us about his own issues with
Hmm.
the Daredevil Netflix series, which is in a lot of cases that he's always getting his ass whooped in some
Hmm.
type of way,
Hmm.
and he was always in amount to recovering.
Hmm.
But I think that overall, um, I think dropping in another MCU character I always like.
Hmm.
Um, them having a good rapport is very important, like chemistry wise. I think that matters too, and it did make the episode kind of hold up enough for me
Yeah.
to feel satisfied by
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also when you get these robbers, and you have at least a little teensy weensy connection to
Mm-hmm.
what's going on with the Kingpin's
Yeah.
storyline on the other
Mm-hmm.
side. But yeah, overall, I'd say solid episode, not without its
Yeah.
issues, but
Also, the joke that the police officer told was good.
oh,
I was I was
her
I
coming
was
up
I
with
was
that on the fly.
I was worried that it wouldn't be good because there's nothing worse in all of
Mhm.
fiction when a when a character says something that in universe is supposed to be funny and it's not funny. You know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about? Like it's one of the worst things that can happen. And so that would be really happy. Question for you though: if a bank robber said that to you, what would your joke be?
Oh, it gotta shit. It gotta be some washed agenda thing. I gotta
Okay.
go.
So I'll
Yeah,
be honest with you. I think that your hostage is probably dying because you're
yeah. I
floundering.
might, I might be cooked. That's not
All
my,
right.
that's not my
All right, so the
strongest.
other two, they both
Yeah.
ironically they both also involve nuns. These are the two
Uh,
jokes I always go to when I need to tell a joke that's funny, okay? The first joke is two nuns are sitting on a bench and a guy walks up to them and flashes. One has a stroke, but the other couldn't reach. Um, and the other one is two nuns. They went to lunch, right? And they got to get back to the convent.
Jesus.
And the older nun says, "I actually know I know a shortcut. Let's go." So they go down an alley that has cobblestones lined. And the younger one's like, "Hey, I've never come this way before." And the older one says, "Yeah, it's the cobblestones."
Oh, oh, oh my god. I think
I
you
think the
would have
hostages
made
are
it.
fine. Though I just throwing those out there because honestly, in the moment, I'm like, she's got to go with those jokes, but she didn't. But the joke she went with was great. I just fucked that penguin. That was great.
Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, it's funny. Like I think that, and it's one thing I thought about the whole loan thing.
Hmm.
Why did it feel like earlier in the series they made the law firm seem to be like very successful?
It is very successful, but what they say is that they're over leveraged, which makes sense that they
Mhm.
would because basically the idea being that they have a lot of loans already, and that I think what they're trying to imply, and I don't know a lot about business, but I think what they're trying
Mhm.
to imply is that they have like a lot of wealth on paper because of their loans, but because they do so much pro bono work, they're going to have trouble paying back loans. Is the idea?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I mean, overall, yeah, solid episode,
Hmm.
and then we transition to six,
Hmm.
and I think the choice being made by the writers and the director in the way that this was shot and the
Hmm.
way that this was presented was very intriguing,
Hmm.
as there was just a parallel back and forth
Hmm.
between Matt and Wilson Fisk
Hmm.
throughout the entire episode. And I thought it was a very inspired choice to
Hmm.
kind of bring it back to the end of episode one with their conversation in the diner. And I think it created what I thought was a really good story for episode six. What did you think generally?
I thought it was really, really successful. I felt like they put a really fine point on the parallels in a way that they had like not fully gone into before. Obviously, you'd been there the whole time, but I felt like this is where they're like putting your face in it. Like, no, they are experiencing the same arc, just in like opposite moral directions, right? Um, and yeah, man, I felt like this really felt like Daredevil finally coming out. Obviously, it had the suit on before, but this is like he's back. He's like, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back. And in the same way, Kingpin, when he was, beating Adam's ass,
Yeah.
that he was back. Like, man, he was back. Man,
That whoa wow, what a scene. We'll get to that later, but
yeah, of
I
course, of
there's
course.
there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out first. One, the development of the now anti-vigilante task force.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing that happens
Yeah.
because of the fact that Muse, they find out
Mm-hmm.
that they can't get they can't get the stuff off the wall because it's just a bunch of human blood,
Yeah.
and Muse is draining his victim's blood and using it for his art, which
Yeah.
is gnarly as fuck.
And they want to avoid a whole hullabaloo about Muse. They don't want an uprising among the citizens, so they gotta make a task force.
They got to make a task force, which the commissioner man not very happy about,
No.
because the Fisk is using all of the quote unquote bad apples in the
Mm-hmm.
bunch. Calls
Yeah.
them very individually motivated is the term that he uses,
Yes.
which is a lot of fun. I loved his rabble rousing speech to all of them to get them hyped. They all there with they're like, wait, what are we doing here? And then like 2 minutes later, they're all like ready to go because
Yeah, it's I do like that they're not even like shying away from like no, these are like the worst of the worst. And it is such a funny idea that, I like the thing I like about it is like how even though Fisk is a violent, cruel man, he does there is an uncomfortability he has originally around these guys because they don't like they're very different breeds. But
yeah,
I think like it's fun to watch him like try to be like we're gonna get them together and they're clearly like a little resistant to there's a resistance to doing all this from Muse.
yeah. First, for because it's the mayor, so like they're
Yeah.
probably thinking like,
Mm-hmm.
can I really show my real side?
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, nah, no body cams, you good? Go
Yeah.
go go, knock him out.
Man.
So this should be that part. That part. That where we're gonna get to kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the meatier part of what the story will be. And meanwhile, while Fisk has this task force, he's also still dealing with the rich folk in the city
Mm-hmm.
as he meets with a bunch of folks, including shout out to Tony Dalton, aka
Mm-hmm.
Jack Duquesne. He's
Your
back.
guy.
The
Your guy.
swordsman, my guy. The swordsman is back in the house, and seemingly all these folks don't want Fisk a part of their. Well, the as one lady put it, we decide whether you eat at the table, regardless of whether you sit at the table or not.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you think of? Well, I thought that was a fun scene in Vanessa explaining to him
Mm-hmm.
kind of how this is supposed to go with
Mm-hmm.
these upper echelon folks,
Mm-hmm.
and how you see that despite the fact that Fisk is this very powerful person, power isn't always just the office.
Yeah. I think it goes to what we were talking about earlier, is that like he thought that he would be gaining more power by doing things this way. And in some ways he does have more power. But the trade-off is that he has more power in some places, but he is now beholden to people in other places, right? Like that is, I think, the thing that he didn't realize, or at least he thought he could work through. That when he was just the crime lord, he had a lot of power and no one really had much of a say over him. And now that he has like more official power, like he probably can do more things overall total, but now more people have a say, and that's what he's pushing up against. And I think that it's interesting. Two things are interesting. One is how that is the case, what I just said, and also like the feeling when you're watching it that I don't know how this ends, but like it's really interesting to see these characters talk to Fisk, not knowing what we know, the audience, right?
Yeah,
Like that they don't know he's a guy who will murder people with his bare hands. You know what I mean? Like they think that they're just dealing with another politician or not even another politician. They think they're dealing with another one of them. They think that they're dealing with another person who's in this club. And for now, he has the appearance that he is. But I think what's interesting is that like they're treating him that way because the unspoken assumption in every single corner of society generally is that you're the person you're talking to won't beat you to death with their bare hands, right? Like, and
right.
I think if you're thinking that might happen, you don't talk to people the same way, and so like they're trying to treat him like they would any other mayor because they're like, oh, this is a mayor who abides by the rules of society, and we know that he doesn't. So there's a tension to all of those scenes that the characters don't realize is there.
Yeah, I think the fun part is the way that Fisk kind of looks at them
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's right, you don't know what I'm about.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a time where you guys will have to see what it really is. Well, the Jack conversation, Jack in particular,
Mm-hmm.
seemed very, very like I'm ready to go to war with you if
Mm-hmm.
necessary on that, which I found interesting
Mm-hmm.
because it was a bit of a departure from his character in Hawkeye,
Mm-hmm.
which seemed a little more playful,
Yeah.
a little more kind of like just happy to be here. This
Mm-hmm.
version of Jack was a lot more forceful,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of reminded me of Lalo Salamanca in Better Call Saul.
The thing I think is interesting though is you have to remember we don't know what happened, what conversations were had off screen, but presumably Jack Duquesne knows all of Wilson Fisk's about. If any, I mean, his
Yes,
stepdaughter, give him the hands. His wife, is in
right.
cahoots. Like, so Jack is the one person at the party who's talking to him the way that he should be talking. You know what I mean? Like he knows what the game is, and I think that's why it was a really interesting conversation. I agree it was a departure because he was such a funny character in a Hawkeye, but it's like, oh no, but he's actually like he's seen Wilson Fisk's true self, and so
Yes,
he's not
yes.
treating him like he's another mayor.
Yeah, and so that feels like a story that's going to continue. And however Fisk decides to go about kind of using his own power to get at Jack should be pretty fascinating because of Jack's own ability and more importantly his wealth and his power himself.
Mhm.
So what does that end up being? And the political aspect of this show, which is something that it's just been like little bits and pieces there, but I would like to see them examine more the fact that Fisk is the mayor. Like he's really involved in all of these things now. So there should be a bunch of people opposing him, not just for the simple fact of, well, he's Fisk, he gets things done, and not the usual like Democrat Republican thing, but it's just of the power, the influence, all of those things going involved. How do I achieve this power? We gotta get rid of this guy for whatever reason. That's gonna be the thing that gets interesting as this show not only continues season one but rolls on to season two.
Yes.
I'm actually excited to see how they decide to go about that.
To not put too fine a point on it, I think a parallel that it has with what's going on in today's world is I think that there are a lot of people who think that he can be dealt with like a regular political problem, and in regular political problems, you don't immediately oppose and try to throw out. You try to work with. You try to make deals, and I think that they're going to be sorely mistaken thinking that way. Both, and when I say they, I'm referring both to characters in the show and the real world.
Yes, 110%. Can't say that enough. So let's go to Matt for a second as we have Angela showing up at his place of work. Skipping school, getting to the point where she's like, my uncle was going after Muse, trying to find out what's going on, and Matt seems so out of the loop, and of course he's going to be out of the loop. He's kind of in his own
Mm-hmm.
shit right now.
Mm-hmm.
They just thinking of the situation that occurred in the bank robbery in the previous episode. His relationship with Heather, which had a very interesting conversation, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, let's talk
Yeah,
about that. That was a great conversation.
yes. Okay, so we'll get back to Angela in a second, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that starts this episode off, and I love the way that Charlie Cox plays it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's one of those things where he could be outwardly mad
Mm-hmm.
about the situation, but it's almost like the dual identity part of him just kind of shows how much he seethes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the same thing that occurred with his conversation with Frank in the
Mm-hmm.
previous episode, where he doesn't want to show his hand. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want to show that this bothers him too much. And
Mm-hmm.
he also doesn't want to show that there's kind of this part of him that wants the bloodlust, that kind of wants to be a part
Mm-hmm.
of that world. And I think what Heather was bringing up to him with the vigilante stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of challenges everything that Matt's ethos is.
Mm-hmm.
And as I always say, it goes right back to season two of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff with the Punisher, where at first it's like, well, Frank, you can't be killing people, but then everybody's kind of looking like the way that you're doing stuff, it's not that much better either. And where do you land on that? And as Heather is talking about it and she's making this book, you could just see it on Matt's face. He was trying to hold it back, but it was coming out in its own way. Well, the thing is, Heather doesn't know him well enough to know that that was happening. So she kind of is like, this is a regular
Mm-hmm.
conversation. But Matt was just kind of almost losing it. What
Mm-hmm.
did you think of that interplay? Because I thought that was very well done.
The thing I thought was so great about it is that there is a way to play that scene where the thing that Matt is feeling is I need to make sure I don't reveal that I'm Daredevil, but that's not what he's playing. He's not worried that Heather is going to find out that he's
Yes.
Daredevil. He's worried that Heather would see him as Daredevil.
Yes.
And because he is like, the thing about him is that he is deeply ashamed of being Daredevil in a way, like that, and that's the thing that you can't say for most superheroes. Most of like Peter Parker is really happy that he's Spider-Man, but Matt Murdock does not like the fact that Daredevil is a part of him, and so the idea that Daredevil and the Punisher would be in the same conversation offends him, and the idea that someone not offends him but like scares him, and the idea that someone who he cares about deeply would ever like he can't before this moment he can't conceive of her knowing that he's Daredevil, and when confronted with a small possibility that she might, it freaks him the fuck out, and I really love that that's what's being played there.
Well, by the way, none of his friends approved of it either.
No.
So Karen and Faki in the series had the same problem.
Mhm.
Faki was always trying to get him to stop. I
Mhm.
remember in the Defender series, the way that Karen would talk to Matt about it, it was almost like he had an addiction of some
He,
sort.
I mean, that's the thing. He
Well,
does though.
well,
He does. That's the
yes,
thing.
he does. He does. That's the thing. Yeah, and that's the great part. That's the great part of it. Um, so like with those conversations, kind of translating to this one, and even Cherry kind of tells him, like, let the police handle it. Like,
Mhm.
don't get involved. Like, try and stay away from it. And Heather's kind of needling him a little bit and pushing him in a way that kind of, it almost in a way almost made me feel like it wanted him to get back in the suit even faster.
Yeah, I think so. I think that that's fair. Yeah, I think that was such a great moment because I love the way that I mean I think I've said it a million times before. I think that dramatic irony is one of the most interesting storytelling things. It's why it's like the backbone of Shakespeare, and we still read Shakespeare. Almost every Shakespeare play is about one character know. It's about the audience knowing a thing, watching an interaction where only one character knows something, and be like, "Oh my god, this is so interesting." You know what I mean? And the way that in superhero projects, when they play with that dramatic irony, when someone's talking about a superhero, not knowing the person they're talking to is that superhero, it's always great because you could. It says so much. The way that someone reacts when they have to like live about something like that, or the way that they feel about that, tells us so much about them. And we learned so much about Matt when he. Even in the Netflix series, when Daredevil is being discussed in front of Matt Murdock, we learned so much about Matt Murdock. You know, like
Yes.
we know it. In the same way that when Spider Man's being discussed for Peter Parker, when Spider Man's being discussed, he's like, I don't know, I think he's a pretty good guy. He's doing good. I mean, like that tells us everything we need to know about how Peter conceives of Spider Man. And
Yes.
Daredevil, Matt Murdock does not feel that way about Daredevil.
No, he doesn't. I think that's why what this episode chose to do with going back and forth between Fisk
Mhm.
and Murdoch was so fun. Because on the other side you have Fisk who's like, damn, seems like it's a lot of it's really hard to kind of do this shit regular.
Mhm.
Do I really? And it's almost comes out of pure laziness,
Mhm.
almost for Fisk.
Mhm.
Just like it's like, do I really have to do this red tape? Do I really have to talk
Mhm.
to these rich folk? Do I really have to do this? And
Mhm.
it's almost like, all right, I want to kind of get back to what I normally do, and the task force is kind of an example of that. It's like,
Mhm.
all right, let me use my power this way. These cops are already corrupt, so wait a minute,
Mhm.
jump in. It makes no difference.
Mhm.
I don't really have to throw my complete weight behind it. It's not the same thing as anything else that would be a little bit more violent and more outward, but yet he sinks into it later because it becomes the Jesus, the Adam thing. The before I found so interesting of the
Mhm.
Adam thing when he's talking to him because he's talking about shared experiences, and I'm like, yo, we are getting real hairy territory, buddy. We are really interesting territory with the way that Fisk is talking to Adam, and the fact that he walks down with an axe, and I initially thought he was going to chop his hands off. That's what I
Mhm.
thought when he brought that axe down.
And
But
so,
no,
I'll be honest, what he does is even cooler. Like that's like such a power move.
it's such a yeah, man. It's such a flex. He's like, "Yo, come get me, bro. Give me a reason."
God,
And
that is such a like fucking fuck you. I love when movies and TV shows do that. It's like I'm gonna give you a weapon to kill me.
it's so yeah, it's so great. That was such a great scene. By the way, just as a kind of like an aside, which I found funny. So they did the whole in a second where where Fisk is putting on the suit and then he rips the jacket and he's having trouble fitting in the suit. So wait a minute, are they doing the slow build towards Fisk becoming the super kingpin in terms of his hugeness?
I hope so. I hope they get him to into the Spider Verse levels.
Because
Um, yeah.
I know that I heard that at some point that might
I
be the
mean,
plan. So that would
famously, Vincent D'Onofrio, I think, still has the record for most weight put on for a role. So from Full Metal Jacket, I think he gained 80 pounds. Um, which
okay. So
I mean,
hey
I don't think he's
man,
doing that now because like it's
yeah,
one thing to do that when you're 22.
no, yeah,
It's
yeah,
another
yeah.
thing to do that when I remember he actually said that when he gained all that weight and shaved his head, people started talking to him like he was slow. Which you know what, that's says a lot about society. But yeah, no, I think he's probably. I think they're getting at that. They don't put that scene in there unless they're trying to be like, oh, he's getting skinny Kingpin. Oh, Zempic Kingpin is out.
The Kingpin is
He's on
hilarious.
Ozempic. Everyone's on Ozempic.
So like yeah, so that's gonna be fascinating to see. So when you go back and forth between the Fisk Adam scene
Mm-hmm.
and the Daredevil Muse scene,
Mm-hmm.
um, that was a pretty fun ass fight between Daredevil and Muse because
Yeah,
Muse was holding his own
I
and
think
Matt
that I'll
was
say this.
kind
I
of
think it was a
yeah.
fun fight. I think story wise, I think it actually is. I don't love that Muse can hold his own. I don't like when they make villains that have no reason to be good at fighting. Good at fighting. It always annoys me a little bit.
Interesting. Well, because I know I wonder if they will get into Muse not necessarily having powers per se.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say that he's actually pretty like.
Okay.
I mean, you could see like he's pretty like he could take a punch.
Yeah,
Like
that's fair. I think I might have just been having a wrong idea of the character based on the brief time
because
we've seen with
Matt
him.
because I said because technically speaking, if we like really went technical beat by beat,
Mhm.
Matt was whooping his ass.
Yeah, Matt was
But
whooping. That's true. That's true. Matt was whooping his ass. But the thing that really was annoying is that he was still focused on Muse when time is running out to save.
oh yeah. Well, that's the what we got. We get into
I
the
know.
bloodlust aspect of it, and him kind of wanting to choke Muse out until the very last second.
Hmm.
And I think I think the show will now be suited better going into these last three,
Hmm.
with Matt in the suit and fighting. I think it's just the excitement ratchets up, the tension generally of what the show tends to be is going to be involved, especially when we're going to bring Frank back into the situation at some
Hmm.
point with the task force, and then we got the Kingpin stuff going on at the same time. I feel like we have a very good setup for the
Hmm.
close of this initial season.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting the way that this is obviously the thing that's always going on with Matt, but it feels like Muse is a really good place for him to convince himself that by like stopping Muse he can find absolution. Like that's I mean that's what he does in everything he's doing.
Yeah.
But like Muse is so comically evil in comparison to I mean not comically, he's real life evil in a way that like is you can understand how Matt's like, no, just if I kill this, like you could, I'm sure at some point he'll say like, I just need to stop Muse, and then I'll be fine. Um, but no, I think he's a really interesting wrench to throw into this because, like I said, like I like in the same way I like when a story only has like one supernatural element, like in other storytelling. I like when superhero stuff or like high sci-fi
Hmm.
stuff brings in one like real world bad thing. Like not, I mean, obviously Muse is like killing way more people than like I think
Right.
Teach made the point that if someone kills 60 people, it would not if Muse killed 60 people, there would be hysteria going on. Like there's not, but
Mm-hmm.
a serial killer who just like kills vulnerable women and unhoused people is not a supernatural thing at all. And so throwing that wrench into a world as heightened as the MCU, I think, is inherently interesting. And I hope that they don't sell that element out. I like that it's pretty like real world gross and bad.
Well, I mean, I think the thing for Matt specifically, and I wonder if they'll play on this or touch on this, is that this is going to hit close to home because this person has already been in contact with his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
So whether they have another meeting or another, what's gonna if and just to play on the parallel,
Mm-hmm.
if she was able to kind of get that stuff out of Matt, what happens when she says the
Mm-hmm.
wrong thing to him?
Mm-hmm.
That's where that could get a little dicey, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the Heather situation in these last three episodes. But I kind of like the way that the show has kind of positioned itself going into this last third of the season. It's so funny because with everything that happened with the reshoots and kind of stitching things together, you could see that there's parts of it that over these first six that it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, some of this is choppy, some of this is a little probably not exactly 100% of where they wanted it to be
Yeah.
overall, but with the changes,
Mm-hmm.
adding Frank in more, making some of the fight scenes
Mm-hmm.
more prevalent to everything that's going on,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the series at least has a bit of a stronger footing than I would have thought
Mm-hmm.
after the first couple of episodes. And I feel like they're already kind of letting the buzz out for season two go a
Yeah.
little bit. I'll let folks, if y'all want to go find some of the stuff, because there's set photos all over the place of season two,
Hmm.
which got Daredevil fans very excited
By the
over
way,
what.
if you ever want an example of why my stance has always been and always will continue to be that they have the exact wrong idea when it comes to set photos not leaking, that set photos leaking is actually always a net win for the like unless you're showing something crazy secretive, like
Yeah.
they're keeping Daredevil season 2 in the news every time a photo comes out.
Yes, and I think it, and honestly, quite frankly, I think it's great because people are really legitimately excited about what's to
Hmm.
come with this series, and I think it kind of gives a little bit of a runway for the way that this season can end. And with that being said, let's kind of get into where we stand now. What is the most interesting thing to you about this series right now as we go into the final third of the season?
How the anti-vigilante task force manifests itself and how that relates to Frank, how that relates to Daredevil. I think that and how that relates to honestly Jack Duquesne, how that relates to all the, you know, vigilantes and how, that relates to Fisk. I think that it's such a um I mean, it's a reason why I think it's such a famous comic run from what I understand, that
Yeah,
like it's using the powers of the state, basically the extrajudicial powers of the state to suppress vigilantes is such a I mean, in the same way that I was talking about with a serial killer, like a task force coloring outside the law to stop a certain group of people is not a very superhero. It's not like a superhero unique thing. Like, it's
yeah.
it's like it's taking the weight of police, which have been known to be awful in major cities and otherwise, but in major cities, and like being like, what if we were to take the might of police who are not being following the rules and put that against superheroes? And I think that that's a really interesting thing to see.
Yes, I think one of the things that I would like to see, and it feels like probably it'll be a season two thing,
Hmm.
is more relevant and prevalent vigilantes slash
Yeah.
superheroes kind of being brought into the fold here,
Hmm.
as this will probably be a little bit too much for Matt to handle on his own.
Hmm.
And the thing that I'm like looking out for as far as the end of the season is concerned is that we think about that diner scene, we think
Hmm.
about Fisk and Murdoch and what they've attempted to do throughout this season, and this is where a 6 episode thing of this would never have been able to get us there in a way that makes sense.
Hmm.
Now we've had time to spend with these characters
Hmm.
as they try to do things the other way, and they see
Hmm.
that the other way ain't working for them.
Hmm.
Now we're bringing ourselves back because, as they both said, if you're out of line, I'm going to be there. So, with
Hmm.
that being said, we're now getting to the point where they're going to be there against each other. The only difference is now Wilson Fisk has the power to arrest Matt Murdock and put
Yep.
him in jail. So
Yep.
that adds a little spice to the proceedings.
Yeah, the power of the state is something that, like, obviously, like, the Sokovia Accords exist, but the thing about the Avengers is
Yeah,
the Avengers are like, when the Avengers get taken down, like, you know that the state's not going to beat them. You know what I mean? Whereas like this,
yeah,
like Matt Murdock is, if the entire NYPD is trying to kill him, that's not like a fight you assume Matt Murdock will win.
right. And I think if I look at everything that's potentially like on the board for the last 3 episodes, I think we'll probably see Karen again. We're definitely gonna see Frank again. He's gonna get involved. And then at some point, because they even showed it, that we're gonna see Poindexter,
Hmm.
aka Bullseye, again. So there's just so many players out there
Yep.
that it's bound to be a powder keg, and
Hmm.
how Matt juggles that now that he's back in the suit
Hmm.
just creates a very interesting show. And I'm very happy that after, at least I think, some of the concerns that folks have had about this series and kind of where it might go,
Hmm.
that we have something very compelling and something
Yeah.
interesting going forward. It should
Yep.
be it should be a fun to watch as we get down to it. Um, I feel like that should do it as far as it's concerned,
Yep.
because with the next 3 episodes, I mean, Muse is gonna kill some more folks, I'm assuming,
Hmm.
and then Fisk and Murdoch will have their tete-a-tete at some
Yeah,
point.
Muse is definitely he's going to be building his own muscle museum. That's the most on the nose Muse song reference I've made, but I think I've made you didn't catch any of them, but I think I made 8 different Muse song references as we were going. I'm really proud of myself that none of them tripped you up.
Jesus Christ! Shout out
There's a
to you.
couple times where I'm like, is it if I say there'll be a hullabaloo, will that trip AC up? No, it won't. Anyway, all right. Thanks to everyone listening who got all those. Please give me a tweet or whatever and tell me that you enjoyed it. Anyway,
So salute, yeah, salute to Jake for that, and salute to you guys for listening to and watching this episode.
mhm.
As we will be back next week for more Daredevil, and as I said earlier, we will be back with the Doomsday Cast situation because there's a lot to dive into with that. That's a just the reveal, all of it's very fascinating.
Mhm.
We got a good crew lined up for that episode, which you'll get next week. And with that being said, Jake, where can we find you, my friend?
On Twitter at the J Christie, on Blue Sky at J Christie, on TikTok at the J Christie. AC will have just been on an episode of the Museum of Twitter to talk about a Hulk Hogan tweet when you listen to this, so check that out.
Yes, yes, do check that out. And you can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Canton _3. Follow me on Blue Sky at Anthony Canton 3. Follow the show on all platforms at MC University Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, MC University Podcast, and of course the Patreon where you can get all the good stuff. If you are a wrestling fan, I'm probably going to do a mailbag on WrestleMania as we're a couple weeks away from that. So we got folks in there peppering me with questions. So if you happen to join the Patreon, you can get in that channel, and we have a lot of fun conversations about wrestling. The wrestling channel always something going on there.
Yep. I can tell
That's
you that
one.
because I don't follow it and I'm always getting alerts.
Yes. So like there's some we're always talking wrestling in there, and yeah. So appreciate everybody for listening, supporting, watching, and all of those things. And I'm looking forward to next week. Next week's
Yeah.
going to be a fun week
Hmm.
of MCU content here.
Yep.
So keep it locked. For Jake Christie, I'm Anthony Canton the third. This has been Marvel Cinematic University, and we will talk to you next time.